it is not your partner's job to parent you. It is not their job to be responsible for your own mental well-being. Big difference between offering support and validating, offering reassurance when they need it, sure. But we have to, the individual, we have to work on ourselves before we can work on the relationship. And one thing I'll suggest to, let's say, partners without the OCD or without the anxiety disorder is really trying to refrain from blaming language. Like, anxiety is always causing us to get into fights, or your OCD is causing us to, not enjoy life. Well, instead of that, maybe using an I statement like, I see you're struggling. What can we do to make this experience better? How can we work together as a team? For example, I had a client who was diagnosed with OCD, and we worked together for a long time, like a couple years. And this person got to a point where they were able to identify not calling somebody to get validation for an obsessive thought. And when they realized this, it offered so much positive reinforcement to them, and it gave them this increasingly sense of self and feeling proud of themselves that they sat with it on their own and they didn't reach out to somebody else. And it was such a pivotal moment. Again, it was something so small, but to me, like, it was so significant. It was a huge progress, and that was the catalyst to decreasing symptoms. And again, it's all about the client and them doing all of the work and us pointing that out, like, hey, yeah, we gave you this suggestion, but you didn't do the work. And that helps people immensely. And it's really awesome to see it happen in sessions too.
For sure. I mean, it's super rewarding. Like you're saying, it sounds small, right, or trivial, but the meaning behind that and how impactful that is, like, that person now gained this level of confidence and self-reliance that may have not been present before to ease some of that stress and anxiety.
Yeah.
And I think a big part of individuals feeling super anxious, particularly in relationships, is this constant need for reassurance and control, that it then becomes projecting onto others, and it becomes everyone else's responsibility or job to ease their anxiety, which, yes, sometimes we need that support and we need that validation because we're social beings, right? We need other people, and that can't be our only source of self-soothing or being able to decrease anxiety, because then we give away all our control, and then we feel helpless. And that's the worst place we really want to be, is a feeling of helplessness.
Well, exactly. And you're talking about, too, the difference between enabling a behavior and being a supportive spouse or partner. So sometimes with either OCD, anxiety, ADHD, a lot of times it interferes with the couple's system, communicating, conflict resolution, being able to talk through something. A lot of misinterpretation happens there. And and a lot of people will tend to either withdraw or they react. And depending on the level of that reactivity or withdraw, can cause a lot of tension, build resentment over time. And so we have to do a lot of reframing with that. Like, instead of a couple, let's say someone that has OCD and the other partner doesn't. One tip is, okay, let's identify the OCD behaviors. Let's identify their traits, their characteristics. Let's point them out, so that way the spouse is not enabling them or being a quote unquote parent to them in a sense. They can be supportive and say, no, hey, we discussed this. This is an opportunity for you to build your tolerance. I can be here to support you, but this is something that I need you to cope with, and utilize like any type of, coping tool that they may have learned prior. But again, we're building resiliency here at the same time. And that's a big component in treating anxiety disorders, is resiliency.
Absolutely. And having that back and forth understanding, because I think sometimes when individuals are in the throes of anxiety, right, it can be really debilitating, and it can feel all consuming, and we can be really stuck in our own experience of the anxiety and not recognize what it may be like for a partner, a family member, a friend, a coworker even, right? And so it's recognizing, like, yeah, I'm having this experience that's very uncomfortable, and this other person is here, and why aren't they doing the things that I need them to do? But that other person also has their own experience, and they may or may not know how to support you, and it's not necessarily their job to make this feeling go away for you.
Not at all. And that's something that I'm pretty blunt and direct about in my sessions with couples particularly is it is not your partner's job to parent you. It is not their job to be responsible for your own mental well-being. Big difference between offering support and validating, offering reassurance when they need it, sure. But we have to, the individual, we have to work on ourselves before we can work on the relationship. And one thing I'll suggest to, let's say, partners without the OCD or without the anxiety disorder is really trying to refrain from blaming language. Like, anxiety is always causing us to get into fights, or your OCD is causing us to, not enjoy life. Well, instead of that, maybe using an I statement like, I see you're struggling. What can we do to make this experience better? How can we work together as a team? Again, people hear the difference between you're doing this, that causes defensive right away. But back it up and say, I see you're struggling. I see you're having a hard time, right? You love this person. This is your best friend. And I know it can be frustrating, but that's where I think individual and couples therapy can be extremely beneficial to create knowledge, to offer education and be like, hey, this isn't them just, being annoying or, wanting to fight for no reason at all. Let's get a handle on this first and go from there.
Absolutely. And that's why I think it's so important, is because even though in couples therapy, you're kind of working with each individual, you can't spend the whole session on helping one person cope, right? It's how is this couple managing this and navigating this together? And so that individual therapy is going to be so crucial to have way more time to process, find insight, find awareness, and develop coping skills that you can bring to the relationship or to the couples therapy. Like, hey, these are the things I've been working on. I'm really trying. It's not going to be perfect. You're not going to get it right every time, but let me know when you see that I'm not doing it, or help me, or point it out when maybe I am doing it right, or if I'm not doing it the best way. It's keeping your partner accountable too.
And again, just pointing out positive progress. Hey, I saw you were struggling, but I also saw you working through it. And I really appreciate that. And the other part is saying, acknowledging that appreciation and just being very mindful that their partner is also just as important. Even if they don't have the OCD, they don't have anxiety at all, there's still stress, right? And so stress management comes into play. So I might tell a couple, hey, I know you have OCD and you don't, but let's talk about stress management because I'm sure that impacts the both of you. And then both of them use that together and they positively reinforce that together, that makes progress, honestly, so much more quick. And
absolutely.
Now, again, it's not an easy process at all. It's time consuming. I tell people that at the beginning, we're trying to rewire the brain. That a lot of mental effort and can be exhausting. So that's where a lot of self-care strategies come into play also.
And even with that, right, there's a lot of repetition that has to happen and a lot of reinforcement of particular behaviors over and over again, with the reaction being a positive one as well, to help us rewire that too. Because I think a lot of times when an individual is anxious, the reaction of their partner can also stop them from being honest, or can stop them from being more forthcoming or doing particular behaviors, based on maybe the way they were raised or their family environment when someone made a mistake, right? So it's also understanding the way that you react or speak to your friend or family or partner who may be more sensitive to that, can also kind of enable them from being honest and open with you when they have anxiety.
Absolutely. It's voice tone. It's, like you said, family of origin plays a huge role in this. How did you learn to manage conflict or anxiety or talk about emotions growing up, which is a big talk about in couples therapy. And it really does increase a person's insight and awareness, and can also have people be more sympathetic towards each other. Again, it's tough to do that. It's tough to rewire the brain, but I mean, it's definitely doable if people take accountability, if they have a willingness to want to work on the relationship, and if they genuinely want the relationship. Those are the three things. Whenever people check those boxes, that's where I see therapy also being the most productive and the most successful.
Because both people have to be in it.
Exactly. But I do see a lot of the OCD and ADHD have sometimes been some of the biggest barriers in a romantic system. the worry, it's time consuming, people get flustered easily. I think that's something we have to be mindful of when working with couples is just the intensity of where they're at.
And so I wanted to ask you if you can kind of dive a little bit deeper into OCD, but also what pure O is in OCD. Because, I've been seeing more of that, and that it's, from my understanding and from some of my training, I don't have a bunch of experience with individuals with OCD, but that there's usually a behavioral component that goes with intrusive thoughts versus kind of the pure O is just that there's the intrusive thoughts, but we don't necessarily see the external behavior. Is that right? Or if you can kind of dive more into that?
So a lot of newer research has indicated that with pure O or like OCD, it's not just obsessions and it's not just compulsions. They kind of go hand in hand, right? Compulsions are not simply just behaviors anymore. We can have compulsions about thoughts. So the two are like intertwined together like this. So with pure O, I think the obsession really is an overactive amygdala and an overactive cortex, which again, like this is for our listeners, this is something that you can look up on the OCD website, or you can look at this book called Rewire the OCD Brain by Catherine Pittman and William Young. It's a great book. It gives a lot of really good examples of how to rewire our thoughts, but also gives a lot of education. So when it comes to pure O and obsessions, again, I look at, have these been so intrusive in your life that they have caused significant impairment and disruption to your activities of daily living? If so, let's take a closer look at what that means. However, let's say it's a circumstance, right? Someone just lost someone, for example, and they're having a very hard time and they might be obsessing over the past history. I don't think that's pure O or OCD. I think that's a circumstance.
Okay.
But it does become this just unexpected, excessive, time-consuming worry and the inability to get unstuck. So we call them sticky thoughts and ruminating thoughts. Perfectionism, for example, is a big one that I hear a lot. People, if they can't, like, they're so perfect at work, for example, but they may be late to a meeting or a party because they have to prepare for so long before this. So again, that's causing severe impairment in their life.
Okay. Yeah, because I wasn't sure exactly of the difference with the pure O, because I feel like it's tough, and this is why it's really important for individuals to have very specialized therapists or practitioners with OCD if that's something they're struggling with, because so many symptoms can overlap with generalized anxiety that it may be hard to tease out, and I feel like the treatment is going to look different.
My treatment for OCD, there is overlapping treatment plans for OCD and anxiety, but when it comes to OCD specifically, it's way more of the exposure prevention therapy and exposing us and learning about those ruminating thoughts a lot.